that we are live. So,
Yeah.
one, good afternoon. Well, good morning. I am excited. I'm going to try to keep my voice low because I've been going loud here. And you all are jumping into a conversation that already sparked. So, we apologize for being a little late. But Bill has already, and Mr. Piper, who I'm going to call Bill throughout this conversation, and Kathy Horton, who I'm going to call Kathy throughout the conversation, has already started dropping gems in the conversation that started or preceded this one. So, excited about the opportunity to be here. I'm Isaiah Oliver, serve as president and CEO at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. And I often say that means I lead an organization that focuses on engaging people in the world of philanthropy or love for humanity, giving their time and their talent and their treasure to make communities better places. In this case, we're talking about Flint and Genesee County that has a number of people, a number of individuals, a number of families that have committed just that, giving, which Bill will talk quite a bit about later, giving and not taking, but giving to make community a better place, giving to make this a place that we can love in and love deep and love hard and love strong. And so I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have, but I'm also more excited about the folks that I'm going to have the conversation with. I've got my predecessor, mentor, mother, aunt, and Kathy Horton, who is joining us for the conversation. And obviously have Mr. Bill White, who is the ultimate philanthropist, but of giving time, talent, and treasure, the trifecta. And so before we jump into a deep conversation, I'm going to ask both of you to kind of give us a bit of who you are. And so oftentimes people will say, man, my life flashed before my eyes. I want you to do that for our Facebook audience today. Just really give them a flash of who you are, how you got here, what your assignments have been, and why you're excited about today's conversation. We'll start with you, Kathy, and then we'll jump to you, Bill.
Who am I? Well, I consider myself one of the most fortunate people to have lived there. That's because I was born into a really loving family. One of the quirky things about me is I was born on the 4th of July and happened to believe that all the celebration was all about me until I was 7 years old. So I grew up with a really strong self-image and a lot of confidence because the whole world celebrated my birthday. But most importantly, I had parents who taught me that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I would say that's the kind of guiding principle of my life. I feel like so much richness has come to me. And so I am trying, in a spirit of gratitude, to return that. I've had the great opportunity to have my 3 professions all be belief-based work. And my final career track took me to the Community Foundation, and it was the fulfillment of everything I believe in terms of giving back to make the community a better and stronger place. And now I'm in my final chapter, my retirement, and I'm having a wonderful time living a really great life, thanks to good mentors like Bill Piper, who gave me great tips on how to get started with it.
Well, I'll chime in too, Kathy, and tell the people that are listening that there are 7 generations of Pipers that have lived in the city and the surrounding area. And I am the 4th of that generation and the oldest in the 4th of that generation. The family began in the middle 1800s, and my great-grandparents and my grandparents farmed the property between Pearson and Carpenter Road. My great-grandparents were on the west side of Saginaw Street with their farm, and my grandfather was on the right side or east side of Saginaw Street and raised prize dairy herds on that property on this. And so our heritage goes back a long, long way on this. The thing I would say about myself is that I was born in the early part of the Depression years. And so lived through the Depression years and through World War II. I was 12 years old when World War II ended. And the thing that I would say about my relationship to especially the city of Flint is that when the war ended, I wound up being able to be a part of a community that was on the cusp of being very prosperous because of General Motors being the principal industry here in the city of Flint. Turned out that I got the best educational system. General Motors built 8 new plants during my early years. All of my fellow graduates from high school never left the community. They all went to work because the wages paid by General Motors were the best in the country. I got the best of what the community was. I got the best education because it was a premier educational system that was in place. I also got the best professional life as a banker because I was able to stay in the community throughout my 38 years in banking as well. So I feel also quite blessed. I got the best of the world, and I feel as a result that I need to find ways to make it better for those that are now here and may not have the same opportunities that I had.
I'll tell you, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Bill, for introducing yourselves. And as we take this deeper dive into the conversation, Kathy, I'm going to ask you to put on your last hat before retirement, which was president of the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. And Bill, I want you to just talk a bit about philanthropy. So if we start with you, Kathy, just describe what a day in the life of you as president of the Community Foundation of Greater Flint was. And then, Bill, I'd love for you to chime in at the end of that and talk about your relationship with Kathy over the years.
Oh, a day in the life as being president of the Community Foundation. I'm going to say part 1, when I started, which was in 2004, was all about reaping the benefits of my predecessor, particularly Dottie Reynolds, who had been the first paid president and CEO of the Community Foundation. And she had put so much effort into nurturing relationships that would yield the kind of resources that gave the Community Foundation the opportunity to impact the lives of people in 2004. So gifts would come in, and we would all say a prayer of thanks. Thank you, Dottie, for the seeds you planted, because community foundations, their fruit takes a while to ripen. It is not like our current culture of immediate gratification. It is something that nourishes and nurtures over time. And so my first 10 years, I think, were all about reaping the benefits of the work of the Dottie and the staff that had gone before, and then doing my best, of course, to continue to do that. Part 2 was really when the water crisis hit, and that took us out of, I'm going to say, a typical philanthropy mode into a greater sense of urgency. And it made us move out of comfort zones and out of traditional roles and become, I think, a more vibrant and relevant presence. So continuing to nurture and do the long-term work, but take a more proactive role around the immediacy of the huge challenges that the Flint community was facing.
You want me to talk a little bit about philanthropy? Isaiah.
Yes, sir.
Let me do this in two ways. First of all, let me say that my relationship with Kathy started when she was head of the YWCA Foundation, and I became a part of that board. One of the things that you learn very quickly in this world is that you want to support people who are dedicated to making life better for others. Kathy and you, Isaiah, are two of those people. The example that I have often given, and there are many examples in this community of people who have done that, but the example that I use quite frequently is that of Woody Scaff and the Scaff family. If Woody Scaff ever came and asked me to support something that he felt was important in this community, I never said no, because Woody was such a dedicated giver in his own right to what he contributed, both of himself and in his financial support of the community, that there was no way that you could ever turn Woody down. There are many in the community like that. And you two are two of those people as well. Let me talk a little bit about philanthropy, or my feeling about philanthropy, though. Because philanthropy for me is more than just giving money away. You know, the success of philanthropy isn't in the dollars. It's rather in the lives that are changed for the better because people cared. I've seen that at the Community Foundation. I've seen that at the Mott Foundation, where I've had the privilege of serving on the board of trustees for 36 years now as one of the volunteer trustees of the foundation. And where we read in the newspapers many times of the financial support that the Mott Foundation has provided the community, what you never see is the dedication and the commitment and the caring of those people, both the White family, the Mott family, the staff, and the trustees of that foundation, who have cared so deeply about how to make this community a better place to live. And I think if you were, as I sit in those trustees meetings, the focus is always on how do we make it better? How do we make what we are doing better in this case? I think that attitude not only is significant for the Mott Foundation, the Community Foundation, it permeates a number of other places like the Ruth Mott Foundation, United Way, the CRIM, Catholic Charities, Crossover, huge amounts of organizations in this community that are dedicated to trying to find ways to make this a better place to live. And I would say to you, that's what makes Flint, for me, different than a lot of other places. It is that spirit of caring. It is that spirit of wanting to make it better. I also think, to be very candid, that the people who live in this community want it to be better. They want better lives. They want better chances for their kids. And I think the whole effort needs to be, and is a constant effort, to try to bring those together. The people who want to try to make it better and the people who want it better. And so the effort is trying to find the ways to bring that about. And I'm just grateful to be a small part of that. Money is a tool to help make that happen, but it is just a tool. The spirit of the people who are involved, the depth of caring that I see amongst all of these who are trying to make it better is, I think, what makes Flint what it is, and I think is what will make Flint be able to be a better place in which to live as the years go by, too.
So, Bill, you often say that your giving is meant to supplement future generations in philanthropy, not supplant. What advice would you give future philanthropists if you had a room full of them all together? What would you say? What would you share?
Boy, I, I guess I would say, first of all, I, I try to remind them all of what the blessings of their own lives might be. I'd start by trying to help them understand, none of us choose our parents. When we are born into families that love and care for us, it is a gift of immeasurable value. You don't have to look very far to find children who, through no fault of their own, are born into some pretty bad life circumstances. They didn't ask for that. When you look at people, possible philanthropists, and you ask them to look about their own family and upbringings, and the fact that I am sure many of them have been born into families that did love and care for them, it then becomes a matter that you owe back. You owe back to make it better for somebody else. I have said to my children, in relationship to your question, Isaiah, about supplementing rather than supplanting, is that I want my kids to always feel that whatever philanthropy I've done, they can supplement their own philanthropy with, but they can't supplant it. They can't replace my philanthropy. They must become philanthropists in their own right and must be givers in their own right. Fortunately, my family has responded wonderfully well in that way. All of the Piper family have. I'm deeply blessed by cousins and brothers that felt very strongly that this was the right way to live. That's, I guess, what I try to begin is where I try to begin with giving advice, I guess.
I'm going to try not to go down a rabbit hole here, and I will tell you my former boss will make sure that we stay online. But I do have a question. So I grew up, and I often say this, I grew up on the north side of Flint, which is cold for a lot of things. But I will tell you, I knew about the Piper family before I knew Bill Piper, because I grew up a few streets from Piper Street. And after I started to build a relationship with you, you began to tell me stories about the street names between Carpenter Road and Pearson Road. And I grew up on Austin Street. So I often ask questions about Austin Street. Could you just talk a bit about the history of the Piper family? And then maybe, if you don't mind, share a bit about the street names, because I just think it's an interesting story.
Well, as I said before, my great-grandfather's farm was on the west side of Saginaw Street between Pearson and Carpenter Road, and my grandfather's farm was on the east side. So that land between Pearson and Carpenter Road was basically farmland, and my grandfather raised prize dairy herds. He did that from 1900 to 1919. And then in 1919, he went, he sold off the dairy herds and began to a real estate business, which is now still in existence and still involves the Piper family and is 102 years old at this point. When he sold off the dairy herds, he started to build homes for the General Motors people that were coming into the city at that time. And so he subdivided the farm and put streets in. And there's where the street names come. So the Piper Street is an obvious one. Foss was my grandmother's maiden name. Laredo was my great-grandmother's name. Ruth was my aunt's name. Austin was a family name that came because on my grandmother's side of the family, her parents had both been widowed and married each other after they lost their respective spouses. And my great-grandmother had a daughter by her first marriage that she brought into that family. That daughter married and into a family that called the Mockford family, and Austin was one of the names out of that family. So it came from that side of the family as well. So all of those streets, Gracelawn Cemetery is where the family burial plots are. Foss Avenue Baptist Church, I often think of as there because is named after my grandmother. So I'm not sure all of the people in Foss Avenue Baptist Church know that. Karen Aldrich does, because I shared that with Karen at one time. So that's a little bit of the background. And I will tell you, Isaiah, it's another reason why when I look at what my great-grandparents and grandparents wanted to see, they wanted a community that was a good place for people to come and to live. That part of the city isn't as easy a place to live in now as it was when they started out. But I firmly believe that, the family, all of us, want to see somehow a way to make it better for people in that area and in all of the areas of the city as well.
Well, Bill, thank you for taking that rabbit hole with me. And Kathy, I'm going to pull us out of it and just say that I think we both benefited in many ways by engaging with folks in the Piper family from a leadership perspective right here at the Community Foundation. And so my incoming board chair is Mark Piper. It's Bill's nephew. And I know you've had some time with some Pipers at your time at the Community Foundation. So talk a bit about your experience with the Piper family. And if you don't mind, kind of give us a commercial on the Power of Endowment, because that's going to tee up my next question for Bill.
Okay. Well, the Piper family, one of the significant people in my life when I first came to Flint, and as Bill mentioned, I had the opportunity to do leadership with the YWCA, was Karen Piper. And Karen was on the board of the YWCA and on the board of the Community Foundation. And one of the things that Karen helped me do, the board at the YW was, shall we say, more experienced, definitely older. And we knew that we were missing a younger, newer perspective. And so we decided to establish a Young Women's Advisory Council. And Karen was the chief advocate for identifying vibrant young women. And one of those that she brought to me and to our attention was Shannon Easter, who is now Shannon Easter White, who happened to be a very good friend of Karen and Randy's daughter growing up. So Karen was one of those people who not only brought all of her own talent and passion, but was fabulous at bringing the next generation into the work. So Karen looms large. We lost her at a really early age to cancer, regrettably, but she was a really important Piper in my life. Bob Piper was also important. And Bob had a great passion for the Flint Institute of Arts and the whole cultural center. Bob served on our investment committee at the Community Foundation and played a really critical role in making sure that our cultural center was alive and well. So Bob is another Piper who is very important. Then there is Bob's wife, Judy, who served on the Flint Women and Girls Fund at the Community Foundation, and again played an important role in helping us meet the needs of women and girls. And then also Mark Piper, who is their son, who is the next generation. So there's just an abundance of blessing from the Piper family that our community is really blessed by. Jeremy Piper is also another younger Piper who is now on the Mott Foundation board, playing a really important role helping the Mott Foundation continue to do fabulous things in Flint and Genesee County and around the world. So it's quite the impressive family, no question about it. You asked about the power of endowment. So endowment is kind of a hard sell in our current environment where people want immediate gratification. But the beauty of endowment is that the resources are there permanently. And that is actually a staggering concept if you think about it. That a gift given in an endowed form grows and is there for the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. So you don't get to spend it all down in one fell swoop. It has to be nurtured and invested, and that's what the Community Foundation's expertise is. But the beauty of it is that it grows. When my mom was turning 95 years old, we wanted to have a really special birthday present for her, my brothers and I. And I said, Mom, what would you like? Another special trip to Europe or someplace? And she said, no, I've done it all. She said, I have one desire, and that's that I want to be a philanthropist. She said, I want to be able to make sure that after I'm gone, what I care about has some of my love poured into it. So I talked to my brothers and we pooled resources and established an endowed fund with her name on it as part of the Women and Girls Fund of the Community Foundation. We kept it a secret, and the Community Foundation printed up a beautiful little certificate that we framed and wrapped. Not only did my brothers and I contribute, but our children did, and some of our grandchildren did. So we were able to do this establishing gift with small to large funds in her name. And the joy that that fund brought her as she moved into the final years of her life, knowing that in her name, something that she cared passionately about, which is to improve the lives of women and girls, especially those who haven't had the advantage, would go on. And the thrill for my brothers and me is that it gives us a vehicle to continue to honor her amazing presence in our lives, build the resources of that fund, and see the good work now that is being done in my mom's name. It's not a large fund, but it's growing. But the beauty is it gets joined with other smaller funds within the women and girls constellation. And together we can make an impact way beyond what our little fund could do. So it is a wonder to behold that an initial gift that can start out more modest can grow to a level and be joined with other resources to have a kind of impact that is way beyond anything you had dreamed of.
So much like the story Kathy just told, Bill, and evidenced by the description of the engagement of family members and generations of family members. We've talked a bit in today's conversation about generations of Piper family philanthropy or community giving. We've talked a bit about how relationships matter and how nurturing relationships over time matter. Why did you decide Flint was the place for your philanthropy? And then why did you decide CFGF was going to be the tool for engaging in philanthropy?
Well, let me go back and tell you, let's go back to when I was 12 years old at the end of World War II, and growing up through the school system, which was a wonderful school system to grow up in. At that time, there were a whole number of organizations that existed that do not exist today. That for a variety of reasons. Perhaps one of the best examples of that is the number of churches that were in the suburban areas of the city that no longer now exist, that they have been closed in this case. The Community Foundation is the only organization that if you wanted to support and had a field of interest that you were in an organization that you were particularly interested in, which I have, such as the Flint Institute of Music and the Seeing Stars program, I can provide an endowment for them. But if at some future time, 100 years from now, that organization changes, goes out of existence, the Community Foundation can redirect my funds to the most similar kind of support that I wanted and was interested in through the Seeing Stars program. They're the only organization that can redirect that money. And that means that makes a huge difference to me. It means a lot to me to know that whatever philanthropy I do as will be, as the Community Foundation says, for good forever, you know. And that means that's the motivation for using the Community Foundation. And I would encourage anybody, and this is not just because of the two of you who I think the absolute world of, but it's because of how your how the Community Foundation is structured and what it's allowed to do that other charitable organizations cannot do. Yeah.
Whoops.
Oh, sorry. Bill, I'm going to ask a question, and it's going to take me maybe down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to ask you, Kathy, to pull us back out of it if you need to.
Okay.
But Bill, you wrote an amazing letter to Yale. And if you don't mind, just taking a moment to unpack the content of that letter to Yale for our listening audience.
All right. My letter to Yale was to a classmate who had called and asked for a contribution. Last year was my 65th reunion year from Yale. And obviously funds were being solicited for that reunion. I wrote a letter to the classmate who had called to tell him why, after having given to Yale every year for 65 years, I felt that now it was time for me to redirect my philanthropy. I had been privileged first to go to Yale. I'd been privileged to receive scholarships that allowed me to go through Yale because even at that time, it was an expensive place to go. And I committed once I left Yale and graduated in 1955 that I would give back all of the money that Yale had ever given me over the years that I had. I felt that after contributing 65 years, I had done that. And I said to my classmate, I got the best out of what the Flint community was in my growing up years. I've already said that, you know, the educational system was premier. The economic situation in the city was outstanding. General Motors paid the highest wages in the country when I was in school. And today, life isn't that way. And I said, because I got the best, I wanted to redirect my money and my philanthropy towards trying to help this community that had given me so much, to try to help others and make a difference in their lives and allow some of the kids in this community some of those same opportunities that I had, which frankly is very, very important to me.
Thank you for that, Bill. And now I think we're closing in on the end of this, but I also wanted to offer some space for comments or questions from our listening audience. And so if you are joining us via Facebook, please jump into the chat and ask a question if you have one. And I will turn to you, Kathy, just for a moment as we start to get some questions from our listening audience. Your relationship with Bill, you described it as going back a while, and you mentioned earlier a transition from Dottie, or what you've grown. And I know for sure I talked quite a bit about the investments that you made, or the seeds that you planted, that I'm watching or reaping right now as president and CEO here at the Community Foundation. Talk a bit about how we steward not only donors, but amazing impact over generations or over years.
So one of the things about the Community Foundation that might not be as well known is the tremendous depth of volunteers that the foundation utilizes to make its investment. And I think that's one of the reasons why its philanthropy is so relevant, that almost every fund from which the resources flow into the community has an advisory committee made up very strategically of people who represent a broad spectrum of the community. And one of the things that we tried to do, particularly in the more recent or latter years of my presidency, was to make sure that we were engaging young people too. It's so easy to fill boards or committees with 50-year-olds and up. And while that's important because you do gain from the wisdom of their experience, bringing in the next generation is critical. So the Community Foundation is very intentional about bringing in young philanthropists. When I was there, we started something called Gen Forward, which was an attempt to bring in younger people. I think you had to be under 40 in order to participate. And I know, Isaiah, you have continued to adapt that model and engage the next generation so that you don't have to be old and rich to make an impact. You can bring your time and your talent as well as your treasure into the fold. And I think the Community Foundation has been very effective in bringing in younger and younger people, including youth. One of the most exciting things about our Community Foundation is the number of young people, teenagers, high schoolers who are involved and who are putting really meaningful resources into their communities. So it's a very exciting place to be.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I do have a couple of questions here in the chat, and you probably can see them on your screens as well. But I'm going to read one. The first one says, Bill, with your history in real estate, and I think this is meant to say your family's history in real estate. Do you think Flint housing can ever be brought back to life in a vibrant way? And this is from Joe Fike, a current Community Foundation Greater Flint board member.
You know, I can't tell you whether I think it will ever be the same as it once was, but I think it will certainly be better. And I think it can be made better. You know, I want to just take a leaf from Kathy's book there in this case and say, one of the things that is so strong about this community is not just people giving money, it's people giving of themselves. It's the time and the talent that people contribute to this community that makes a huge, huge difference in this case. I think, if we can continue to generate that kind of spirit, if we can continue to encourage people to care, I think there is no question that housing, and I think education, and I think a lot of other of the resources that this community needs can be made possible. I really am optimistic about that. General Motors may never be the dominant industry again, but that doesn't mean that the community can't be a vibrant and a wonderful place to live. And my hope is that in whatever way possible, all of us can make that happen.
Thank you so much for that answer, Bill. Joel, thank you for the question. And if we did not answer your question, you can jump back in here and can you kind of reframe it? If not, you can ask another question. I'll go on to the next one that I have here. This is from your good friend, Dr. Charlie Nelms. Bill, hi, Charlie. I'm so glad that you're watching along. The question is, one widely held perspective in some communities is the belief that one must be wealthy to be a philanthropist. What would you say to those who believe that?
I would probably say you need to define what wealth is. And wealth isn't just money. Wealth is your abilities, what you can contribute, your the whole wealth of a family that has supported you, that you've been a part of, just because they have loved you and cared for you and provided you opportunities. Wealth is a whole series of things beyond money, in as far as I'm concerned. And I would want people to know that, you don't have to have money to be a philanthropist. You don't have to have money to make a difference. You can make a difference by just being a caring, loving person that wants it better for somebody else.
Thank you so much for that answer, Bill. And I will tell you, Charlie, thank you so much for the question. We have a question from Jeanette Mansour, and I'm going to go to Kathy to start this one because I've heard her give some amazing spills on this, and I've actually built mine upon what I've learned through kind of hearing Kathy kind of answer questions like this one. And then we'll have you to close this one out, Bill. Please talk about the concept of investment, long-term strategic giving versus short-term giving, both of time and treasure.
Okay. I think the most impressive thing as a young child that you can learn is about compound interest. What sounds like a complicated concept, but it's really pretty simple. That you put a small amount in, and over time, that grows. One of the amazing things about endowment is the fact that over time, any gift that was given to establish an endowed fund, that amount is given away. And at the same time, you kind of reach that threshold that the original gift you gave, that endowed fund has usually doubled or tripled or quadrupled. And so you have to have the long vision. We tend to be looking for results right around the corner. But honestly, if you look at our life today, the things that are really keeping people from having the fullness of what was intended in this life are deep-seated, complex issues like poverty and racism, economic status that is kind of unjust. The only way we're ever going to be able to really make a dent, literacy is another great example, is to invest generation after generation to turn that corner And as Barack Obama loves to say, to have the arc of the universe turned toward justice, it's going to be from resources that are invested over the long haul. And endowment is the best way to have that kind of investment.
Kathy, you're so amazing. Bill, would you like to follow that?
Well, the comparison I'd make is that if somebody who is working wishes to be able to retire at some point with some kind of comfort and some kind of economic security, they have got to begin to save and invest early in their professional careers and set money aside for that to happen. It's the only way that it turns out that retirement for most people is possible, is if they've saved in retirement programs through their work life. The same thing is true from a philanthropic point of view. If you want to see good happen on a long-term basis, you have got to set money aside early, let it grow, and watch it do its work, both in growing from an investment point of view, but also then providing some of the support to organizations that are important.
Thank you so much, Bill. Kathy, I'm going to go with this next question to you to start. And I'm going to take a little bit of artistic license here. Crossover Downtown Outreach Ministry. I hope you're not angry with me. But the question says, what would you say to someone who thinks you have to be rich to start an endowment? And I know we started that question with Charlie's by talking about having to be rich in order to be engaged in philanthropy. And we moved to time and talent. I would love for you, Kathy, if you don't mind, to talk a bit about endowment, but focused on maybe designated agency and what it might mean, because this is Crossover Downtown Outreach Ministry. So I just want to spin it a little bit so we get a bit of a different answer there.
Right. Well, I can really relate to this question because before I was the president of the Community Foundation, I was the CEO of a nonprofit, the YWCA of Greater Flint. And every nonprofit struggles tremendously to have adequate resources to do the work that is critical to its mission. What an endowed fund allows is that resources that you don't have to raise in that minute and in that day can be made available to sustain you over either difficult times or allow for greater investment in the kind of mission critical work that nonprofits do. So it's hard for a nonprofit because they struggle just to raise operating resources. If donors care about the mission of that nonprofit, one of the best things they can do is to create an agency fund that is there. Bill has done this, that is there, and then that nonprofit is freer to grow its programming, to do its resources, and not to be constantly in a survival mode and struggling kind of from paycheck to paycheck.
And Bill, if you can pick up from there, and I know you probably want to add on top of this, but if you could in your comments, add in what your hopes are for Court Street Methodist Church.
Well, let me focus on that for just a second and tell you that Court Street is my home church. It was also the home church for my great-grandparents. They were members of that church in the 1800s, gave the light fixtures that hung from the sanctuary when it was built in 1892. The family has been part of that church ever since. And we have married, buried, baptized, And every nook and cranny of that church has a memory for our family in that church. The church parlors, when they were built in 1930, my mother and father were the first members to be married in those church parlors. My grandfather was the building chairman who put the parlors on the church. I helped raise the money for that. So lots of history. Downtown churches have changed over the many years. I think from my point of view, it is important to make some provision so that when something happens to me, that the support that I've been providing while I've been living is able to continue even after I'm gone, so that the church can be confident that they are not going to lose support that is essential to their ongoing survival, really, on this. So I feel very strongly. That's one location. I also feel fairly strongly about the work of the FIM and the opportunities that the Seeing Stars provides for kids who no longer have the opportunity to take music in the schools, but can take music lessons through the FIM. And my wife was a piano teacher, loved music. That was very important to her. And this is a chance for me to help kids whom she wanted to see get chances to take to learn about music and enjoy music, to have that chance. So those are a couple of things that are very important to me from a support point of view.
Thank you, Bill. And I think one last question from Brian Kane, and then we're going to move toward a close here. Bill, can you share your experience about giving your first philanthropic gift and how that helped shape your journey in philanthropy?
Wow. Where was my first philanthropic gift? I'm not sure I can remember on this. I'm going to have to struggle a little bit to say. However, I will tell you that I was raised to always, even as a youngster, to set aside a little bit of money out of my allowance to give to the church. So that probably the church was my first philanthropic gift, because when you were in my era of growing up, and if you earned an allowance, it was always a part of our family that you set aside a portion of that to give away, in this case. And I think that probably is my first experience, and probably what starts your thought process to knowing that you just continue that as life goes on. So
I'll tell you, one, I'm just thankful for having had the opportunity to facilitate such a conversation between such dynamic people. I would hope and pray that I was at least directionally accurate in asking questions and facilitating the conversation, but I'd imagine there's probably one or two things that I just failed to ask or lift up. And so as we move to a close, I'm going to offer an opportunity to you, Kathy, first, and then you, Bill, to follow on just sharing something with our listening audience that just didn't make it in the questions, just didn't fit in any particular response that you might just want to share with our group here. Kathy?
Well, I think you did a great job. I think what I would choose to share is how my understanding of philanthropy has changed since I left the community foundation. So while I was there, it was all about doing good, and nothing makes you feel better than doing good. What I now believe is that the ultimate goal is not about doing good, it is about enabling justice. And I think the current environment that we live in the United States and frankly around the world, whether it's climate change or racism or economic disparity, philanthropy now is a chance to right the disparities and create a more just world. And that is ultimately, I think, what those of us who have been privileged with resources are called to, is to realize it isn't just about that great feeling of doing good or the things we love. It is about the responsibility of justice. And that, I think, is the highest call that we are called to. And that's probably where I feel even more passionate and more committed, even than I did in my work years.
Thank you, Kathy. Bill?
I would say a couple of things. And I've said this to a number of my former employees who, after I left my professional life, said, you know, it isn't quite the same anymore than what it was when you were part of the organization. And my comment to them is, many things change in life in this, but you should never cop out. Just because you can't change the whole world, you can still change and make a difference in the piece of the world that's yours. And I think we want to make sure we don't get lost by thinking that just because we can't change the whole world, we need to remember that we can individually still make a difference in that piece, which is ours. Second thing I'd say is that whatever blessings come into your life, they were never intended to be returned. They were intended to be extended. So as people touch your life with goodness, hopefully you will be able to touch somebody else's life with that same goodness that came into your life. And finally, the final thing I'd say is that never overlook the chance to make an impact. People who don't have to, but choose to, the difference in life. When you don't have to, but you choose to, you can make a huge impact on somebody else's life. Never overlook that opportunity.
And I want to thank both of you. I'll close by combining a few comments that are in the chat. One says, Kathy, Bill, and Isaiah. I was just writing with these amazing folks. But thank you for your comments, thoughts about the philanthropic efforts that have supported our community. This was a wonderful event. Elizabeth Hamilton says, as a young person interested in philanthropy, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to scroll up to Judy Clifford. And she says, thank you for this, Bill. Paying it forward in practice and volunteering is equally important as the money you can give to any organization. I am thankful to be not only in community with you all, but in partnership with you, in relationship with you. And I'm thankful for the opportunity. This last hour has offered us 59 minutes and 13 seconds now, so we're right on time. Thankful to you all for giving us an hour of your time. And I look forward to continuing to build the relationship that we are building to make a stronger community. Thank you all.
You do too. Thank you both.